I'm going to answer it today about military service. How can that help your parents get them immigration status? So if you have anybody in the military, anybody thinking about joining the military, do me a favor, share this video. As always, give us a like or a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. And if you have any questions while I'm here, happy to take them. If you're watching later, drop them down below anyways, or send me a direct message if it has private information. All right, so I was asked the question, Abogado, if I join the military, can I get my immigration papers from my parents? Love my parents, care about them. They brought me here when I was young, or now I've adjusted, or I was born here, but they're undocumented. What can I do to help my parents? Does joining the military help? So it's a longer answer, right? There is a program called military parole in place. So if you enlist in the armed services, we'll go into details about what that means in just a minute, you can apply for your parents for what's called parole in place. What the hell does that mean, right? It means you're essentially asking the US government to give them a legal entry into the country. A fictional legal entry. And they can get a work permit through that as well. Now, why is that important? So we got to rewind. We're going all the way back to how do you get somebody originally immigration papers, right? So if you're married to a U.S. citizen, if you have a U.S. citizen child that turns 21, the first question I'm going to ask you is, how'd you come into the country? Because our immigration laws are such that to adjust status here in the United States, you need a legal entry. So if you came in with a border crossing card, a tourist visa, which are the most popular ones, some sort of student visa, you have a legal entry. When your child turns 21, if your spouse is a U.S. citizen, you can adjust status here in the United States. Now, if you say, no, Abogado, came through the desert, no legal entry, then I ask you, okay, did anybody put a petition for you before 2001, looking for the law known as 245I? Petition for you, or maybe you were on your parents' petition, one of your uncles or aunts or grandparents submitted for one of your parents. You can pay a $1,000 penalty fee and still adjust status here in the United States. If you have neither one of those two, then I go to the third question, are any of your kids, family members in the military? Because then we can use what we're talking about right now, the military parole in place, as our legal entry, so that you can then go on to adjust status. And if you're 21, you can apply for your parents. You give them the legal entry by being in the military. Then you independently apply for them, right, as to adjust their status so they can become legal permanent residents. Now, it's not a magic bullet. What do I keep saying? Gives them a legal entry, essentially. So it lets you get to the interview. Gives you a right to have an interview in the United States. Now, your mom or dad must still be admissible into the country. What on earth does that mean? So first, to get your immigration papers, you need someone to sponsor you. You need legal entry, 245I, military parole in place. Okay, we're there. But before you submit that application, we need to be sure that mom and dad are going to be approved at the interview. And in our terms that we use, it's called being admissible. There's grounds of inadmissibility. The most common one we see, which breaks hearts, is that someone was here in the country. They left in 2008 to go back to a funeral, take care of a sick loved one, came back a month later. That person do not get to adjust status in the country. They're called inadmissible. Joining the military doesn't help, doesn't cure that ground of inadmissibility. If one of your parents, again, I'm talking about a parent because this was the specific question, if one of your parents has a certain crime that makes them inadmissible, a drug conviction, aggravated felony, something along those lines, that does not get cured by you joining the military. If one of your parents has a false claim to U.S. citizenship, at one point they came across the border, even they were escaping, a situation of violence or whatever it was, but they gave declaration that they're a U.S. citizen, they're inadmissible into the country. So the grounds of inadmissibility is huge. I'll do a whole separate video on the grounds of inadmissibility. But that's why it's so important that if you are considering joining the military just because you want to help your parents out, you really want to make sure first that they're going to be admissible into the country. Right? So we want to go through the grounds of admissibility. What we do here is obviously you come in, I'll ask all the questions. Maybe we do a background check. Maybe we send off a FOIA, OBIM, FBI to see if there's anything in the background that might make the person inadmissible. And usually just through me asking the questions, I can figure out, yeah, you're going to be okay, or no, you're not. So I wanted to clear that up because I got the question. Look, I'm not here to push anybody into the military or force them to do anything they don't want to do. It's very simply, this is the law as it is, right? So let's go over here and take a look. This is the USCIS page right here, which talks about the parole in place. And this is what it means when we talk about if you're in the active duty member of the U.S. Armed Forces, if you're in the selective reserve or the ready reserve, or you served on active duty in selective reserve or ready reserved and were not dishonorably discharged. So these are the individuals that can ask for parole in place for the family members, right? The application that you send off is right here. It's the form I-131. USCIS there gives you all the information that you need to send that form off. Again, I would do this if the person is otherwise admissible into the country and if they didn't already have a legal entry, right? So if you're considering going into the military to help your parents immigration-wise, but they came in with a tourist visa initially, parole in place, doesn't really help. If you're only 18, what you might want to do is this other one, which is called deferred action, right? Deferred action sounds familiar, right? Sounds like the old DACA. Well, it essentially is. Deferred action for childhood arrivals, that's DACA, that's DACA. This is deferred action for those who have someone in the military. Same requirements, active duty member of the armed forces, individual in select reserve, ready reserve, or was not dishonorably discharged, right? So it's a little bit more the requirements here, and you send the letter requesting is not really that same form. I guess they do want the G325A there. Why would you do this, right? Why would you do the request for deferred action instead of parole in place? If you're 18 years old, you can't sponsor your parents until they turn 21. So if they came in with a tourist visa, have been here 23 years, and you're 18, getting them parole in place is essentially giving them what they already have, which is that legal entry. So you can do a deferred action, though, because you're not going to turn 21 for 3 more years. So for 2 years, they can get the promise not to be deported, the work permit, until you turn 21. And then if they're otherwise admissible when you're 21, you submit the application, then they go on to permanent residency and then eventually to citizenship. So that, my friends, is how you do it. If you're in the military or thinking about joining the military, that is the benefit to you and to your family, okay? Voy a cambiar a español, but if you have any questions in English or anything that wasn't clear, feel free to drop it down in the comments. Any other questions you have, as always, drop those down below. Even if they're not related to the subject, happy to take them on while I'm here, all right? So, comunidad, alguien me preguntó si entrando al ejército lo puedo ayudar a sus papás a arreglar. So, la pregunta sí es un poco más complicado. Sí existe lo que se llama parole in place para alguien que tiene un familiar en el ejército. So, si sus hijos entran al ejército a 18 años, cuando ellos están ahí, sí lo pueden pedir ese beneficio. Ese beneficio de parole in place es igual a tener una entrada legal. Es como usted entró con una visa y da permiso que usted puede arreglar aquí dentro del país si usted es elegible a arreglar aquí en el país. So, lo que queremos hacer primero es preguntar si usted es admisible al país o no. Si estaba aquí, 2008 salió a un funeral, a estar con su familia, estaba 2 semanas en México, regresó, lo agarraron cruzando, usted no es admisible al país. Un hijo entrando al ejército no es garantizado y va a ser negado de todos modos su aplicación de residencia, porque tiene que estar admisible al país. Mucha gente piensa, mi hijo cuando cumple 21 años, mi hija cuando cumple 21 años, y ella está en el ejército, está bien. No, hay muchas más preguntas que tenemos que hacer. Tenemos que estar seguros que usted es admisible al país y no hay un delito en el pasado, no salió, no hay admisión que usted era ciudadano antes. Todas las razones por que el gobierno puede negar su admisión, queremos estar seguros antes que usted va a la entrevista y enfrentar y gastar mucho dinero que usted va a ser admisible. Hay otra opción que se llama acción diferida, muy similar al programa de los jóvenes de acción diferida, que si usted tiene un hijo en el ejército, lo puede pedir ellos por 2 años, promesa que usted no es deportado y permiso de trabajo. Queremos usar ese camino si sus hijos nada más tienen 18, porque si entró con visa está bien, cuando tiene 21, ellos pueden arreglar si usted es admisible al país, pero entre 18 y 21, ese programa de acción diferida lo pueden dar el permiso de trabajo y promesa de no ser deportado. ¿Okay? So esa es la respuesta a la pregunta. Entrando en el ejército, ¿lo puedo arreglar mis papás, sí o no? Si hay algo que no entendió, por favor, ponlo en los comentarios. Hágame me pregunta. Si no está viendo en vivo, de todos modos, no se preocupe, ahí le puedo poner los comentarios. Si estás viendo en YouTube, por favor, ponga subscribe. Estamos creciendo y creciendo el canal. Ojalá llegamos a 1000 antes del fin de verano. Es lo que yo quiero hacer. So, por favor, pongan subscribe a nuestro canal. Ojalá todos tienen un excelente jueves. Y si tienen más preguntas, ponen en los comentarios o me mandan un inbox. Que tengan un excelente día. Nos vemos.